that I don't want to say that I'm going to fail. I mean, in most cases, achieving what I want, I felt like after coming to Cambridge, I need to admit failure. In grade 3, a teacher asked us to write a passage on our dream. He asked what was my dream. At that time, I only knew about Harvard, so I said I want to go to Harvard. I want to go to Cambridge. So for like a few weeks, I wake up every day at around like 5:40. They have their morning reading at 6:20 or 6:30, and very early. The kids wake up very early. Maybe one of the worst years that I had since I entered primary school. Because I had a very smooth life and people was like considering me as a genius or something when I was like going into the school 2 years younger than them, taking like the TOEFL test and being like 20 or 30 points higher than them and just say you're a genius. If I go die at some point, some people would remember me as a good person. So that's what I call success. Is like at any point, if I suddenly disappear, so I'm dead or somehow, and then people will remember me with a good image.
Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my podcast, Coffee's on Me, David Quan, where I strive to give guests legacy-worthy interviews that listeners can enjoy while cooking, commuting, relaxing, or walking their pets. Easter holidays, both my guests and I have been very stressed about exams coming up, but we've just not had coffee, but we've had Gardies, and it was incredibly delicious. And in fact, one of the really nice things I saw at the end was as we were leaving, my guests went to get some more napkins to clean up the table, which I thought demonstrated great manners and exemplified, I think, some of the things that I quite admire about him. But for now, we are approaching 10,000 podcast downloads, and if you have been enjoying the discussions on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts, thank you, and please do consider leaving a review and nominating a guest by contacting me via my Linktree, David Quan. Seeing this podcast on people's Spotify Wraps or receiving positive messages about the guests give me tremendous fulfillment. I cannot thank the guests enough for their courage and insights. For those new to the podcast, welcome and thank you in advance for your engagement. Please know that I don't take your time and feedback for granted, because when I started this podcast at a low point of my time in Cambridge this time last year, I was mostly just nervous about humiliating myself. But I went ahead with this passion project based on 3 ideals that still make up the content descriptions for every single episode. First, a purpose of giving. Second, learning from others. And third, sharing of stories. Given my many inadequacies, I will certainly listen back to laugh at how naive I am. But I genuinely maintain the deep conviction that this passion project, if wholly true to those founding motivations about giving, learning, and sharing, is a worthwhile pursuit. So now on to my very special guest. Shen Lin is a first-year economics student at Trinity College, University of Cambridge. At the brink of turning 18, which is just hours away, he is excited to be invited to this podcast to talk about his experiences as an overseas student and his thoughts about the world. Shen received his offer to Cambridge at the age of 15 and was forced to take a gap year before coming to Cambridge. He felt that the world around him is changing every day since he started his gap year, and even more so after he started his university course last October. Being one of the 2 students and the first in his province to come to Cambridge, Shen has had a memorable high school experience different from many other Cambridge freshers. He was excited, but never, quote-unquote, well prepared for college, according to him. Shen, I'm delighted to have you, and welcome to my podcast, Coffee's on Me, David Quan.
Happy to meet you, David. Again at your room. I missed it for like a while.
When was the first time you came?
In January for the first Q meeting to meet everybody.
What's Q?
Q is Cambridge University Entrepreneurs. I think it's a society which I'm like excited to join at first, and then I found it like to be very rewarding.
We're pretty cool, right?
Well. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, pretty cool. Yeah. So it was an opportunity which a friend Genia told me about, like the opportunity at Q, and we were all excited about like startups and entrepreneurships, because by that time we were doing our like Accelerate project on like an inventory management system, which we are now also entering it for the Q20K competition. Very excited. The idea has improved a lot since like we started it back in December. Yes. And to join Q is also a great opportunity, and to meet you and many others has helped me a lot on like understanding more about like what is it like around like Cambridge societies, the extracurricular side of studies, and also
What is it like?
I feel like it's more professional than I thought. So people have this kind of voice in their head as they are trying to get something done. So they are very productive, motivated. But I guess the motivation is not only kind of like the work-based or kind of like efficiency-based. It's also passion as well, because this is a unique society. And I felt like what I'm seeing around all societies, I see people who doesn't do much things and see people who are extremely motivated. And Q is an example of an organization which everyone is very involved and motivated to do, internally motivated to do what they are doing. And very, very happy to be a part of the organization. Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad because we've really, really enjoyed having you, and I've really just admired the enthusiasm that you brought to the team, and just how you're so willingly, do all the grunt mundane work and contribute at a very high standard. And I know that we'll think very highly of you. And your birthday tomorrow, I've actually got you a birthday card which I've noted down some of the things that I have learnt from you as well. I'll give it to you here, but you don't have to open it now.
Thanks.
So it is a special time. I mean, you're hours away from becoming an adult. And this is great for the podcast because, I mean, we were talking about, this being a legacy-worthy interview, hopefully giving you a piece of recording that you can look back on in 10, 20 years' time. And I know that a lot about you will change, your views will change, it will develop, but hopefully we can capture some of the most special things in the final hour. So thank you for the privilege of being here.
Thank you as well.
So I guess, it would be really helpful maybe to walk through your life. So let's start at the very beginning. Where were you born, and tell me a bit about your family.
I was born in Jiangxi province, China. A relatively small inland province. So it's not that developed in terms of the cities and industries and stuff. But we have good landscapes, the famous mountains and rivers and stuff like that. So I was born in 2005, and my family was both of my parents, I was the first child in the family. Both of my parents were very enthusiastic about having a child. Maybe it's not the right word. I've been using wrong words for
中文是什么?
Kind of excited, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, excited to have a new child because as a first child in family, and I think they were the parents who have thought a lot about how I should grow up in the future and excited to bring me the best opportunities possible. So they are very motivated to do so. Their most important project in their life,
Oh yeah,
and
of
so
course.
Starting very young, so they have brought me a lot of opportunities to learn all these kind of different things. At a small city in China, we are nevertheless one of the most competitive provinces in terms of the Gaokao system. So by the average score line in which you need to score to get to which level, whichever university, so it's kind of a hard system, but in the end you need to score much higher in Jiangxi to get to a university than the others. And it's a competitive environment. So in the end, and through a primary school, middle school, I was in the the normal curriculum, the national curriculum. And my parents was thinking about maybe I should have an alternative way, and that's what brought me to international education. So the first attempt was they were just basically reading about boarding schools in the UK. And so I went to the UK for the first time in 2017, not for Cambridge, but for the boarding schools. I visited 5 schools at Bindon, Tonbridge, Dulwich, Brighton College. I found alumni around these schools around Cambridge often, yeah. But I didn't come because my parents the reason why I was especially talking about the incredible love they have for me wouldn't allow me to lose me at the age of 11 or 12 to have me abroad. Yeah. And basically a new school just opened in Jiangxi, which was an international school.
什么名字?
Jiangke Fuzhong, Jiangxi University of Technology High School.
Okay.
and the school was kind of like 3 years old by the time it opened its international department. So it's kind of like a new challenge for everyone, like for the teachers, the principal, and for the students as well. But my parents were like, thinking about maybe we should do like kind of like an international curriculum at home, and try to see if I turn out well, I'll be more prepared for boarding schools in the UK. But what actually in the case was that they just don't want me to go to the UK, despite they have been planning it for so long. Wow. They were like, they wouldn't want me to leave them at such a young age. And since I'm the only child in the family,
sure,
it's kind of like the expectation that many Chinese parents have for their child. They want them to be great as great as possible, but they have this kind of like internal kind of like what they call like their heart on the outside. Sometimes like it's Chinese like just translation like 就外表很坚强，但是内心却很柔软，就是they the love
做父母的是吧？
Yeah, they have love and they just don't want me to leave them there like 12 or 13. They don't think that I will be living a great life here, despite maybe better school, better things like that, and maybe a more flexible as well as diverse curriculum than the normal system.
但家人的价值观是吧？这个从小的这个教育还是比较重要。那你的名字，为什么叫这个名字？有什么含义吗？ So in English it would be like, is there any significance to the name that your parents have given you, given that you know they were looking forward for this child, so they would have really prepared for your arrival?
Actually, the story that I heard from my parents was like, after a few days I was born, they had the name, or no, I think it was before I was born, they had the name. And what they did was basically search through the Chinese dictionary. And they found it like, maybe it's too hard to give me a double name. So like, Lin, blah, blah, like 3 syllables. So double name, they just won't give me 1 syllable because it's too hard to search for 2. And they were like searching around for all the syllables. Some of them have very good meaning. But in the end, they found out this name, like Shen, which means deep and kind of like
depth and
like
very educated, like you
out of expectation, I would call it.
Okay.
Kind of like you never know how much is inside or like prepared. And they found like this syllable could be like, what's the meaning of name?
Yeah.
The meaning is that there's so much meaning. And what's there so much meaning? I can't explain. Yeah, so it was kind of like this expectation. Back when I was young, like 5 or 6 years old, when people around really cared about culture, which is like one thing that people don't care that much now, because now if you go to like the children's hospital, you look at the names of the patients and you find, oh, people are giving like such strange names. Yeah, but back then people care a lot about like the names and the meaning within. And when I was young, like people always tell, oh, you have such an interesting name. And speaking of names, I also want to mention my English name, which I now not that frequently use, because I kind of like believe in the like
your
I
identity.
was given this name, in Chinese, and why should I have a separate English name?
Okay.
If it's not like especially purpose, and my name is like kind of pretty easy to remember, despite like people have all the different pronunciations for it. But I was given an English name by my mother, and she was basically searching through a list of like names and their meanings, like expectation, and we given the name Richard. And what she expected was courage. She wanted me to have courage in things. I don't know if Richard actually resembles that, but, but that's what she had expected, to have like courage, faith, and stuff like that, and to be brave. And that's what she loved about name. But can I actually say that one of the reasons why I abandoned this name, because it has a very interesting nickname. And the reason why I know the nickname was like some like crazy student during class at high school. They would have nothing to do, and they were just looking around at electronic dictionary, entering the name of each person
in the Urban Dictionary.
Yeah, and they found about this, and but anyhow, so I guess like it's good to have just people call me by my first name and last name, I think, Chinese, or maybe Richard, and I love like each one of them. Yeah.
Okay. So the name Richard was far deeper than you thought it was.
Deeper, yeah.
Okay, so your mum and dad wanted you to be courageous, 勇敢是吧？
Yes.
就是做一个有担当的人，有责任心的人。
Yes.
So were you a brave, courageous kid?
I can't like judge myself from like an overall picture. I thought like I'm pretty brave. I mean, I wouldn't call it bravery by sometimes because, to be honest, like I don't have this kind of like maybe braveness when I was young. I consider it as kind of like the situation when I need to save the world and being brave, like superheroes and sacrifices, stuff like that. But I mean, speaking of bravery in the normal sense, like to try different things, new opportunities. I think I was very brave in terms of that, to try different things. And
what have you tried in primary school?
Oh, I tried all sorts of like, for instance, like instruments, arts and stuff. Most of them I quit it. And for instance, piano. Well, it's like, it's kind of like experience in which my parents asked me, do you want to learn? And I said, I really want to learn an instrument. And they say, what? And basically everybody around me is doing piano. I don't know why is that like the piano mania in China, but I say I'm going to do it. And I'm going to be the best. I was trying to be the best. And
how old were you?
Pardon?
How old were you when you made that?
6 or...
And you were like, I want to be the best.
Yeah, I want
at 6.
Yeah, I mean, I always have the sensation of what I want to do. I compare myself to maybe the best I've ever seen. So, for instance, I know a friend who plays piano to like they have this kind of like the grading system, like maybe grade 10, which was a top level. And I said, okay,
at 6?
No, definitely not. But you can, to be honest, in terms of like speaking, there's just so much things to talk about. Like speaking tests is stupid because you can spend a year practicing on the only 3 songs for the grade 10 test, and you can pass it. Despite you can play nothing else, you cannot do any maybe spontaneous like. I don't know how to call it. Like, I don't know how to call it.
Sight reading,
possibly. But I mean, you don't have the
technical skills.
You don't have the skills, but you can pass the test. But yeah, I was thinking about maybe I should do it. And in the end, it turns out I'm so sick of like practicing it for an hour every day. Because every day when I sit in front of the piano, I became interested, less interested, and then yeah. So, but it's kind of like doing sense and getting committed to it and not quitting it immediately. So I spent 3 years playing the piano. First year, very rewarding. Second year, maybe turned a little bit, but I can't remember exactly. And then I was still sticking to it. I was still trying to maybe change a piano teacher because my first teacher was just so demanding, so cruel. And I wouldn't call him a great teacher, but he's a good pianist. But he's not the kind of like friendly, supportive and teacher,
like disciplinarian.
Disciplinarian, like the
traditional.
If you
gotta have it tough love.
Oh yeah, and he scares you a lot and about all different things and never like compliments. Maybe I was too bad, but but he didn't.
So on that, like I also did piano, and you know I've had some really good teachers and some not so good teachers as well. Do you feel like, in terms of like him being scary and stuff, was he intentionally trying to be so, or did he just lack the EQ to empathize with children and to be nurturing and to be supportive and to be kind?
Well, I think like, I don't know like his background, but I guess he's kind of like a lecturer at some local music institution. So that means he has much teaching experience, and that wouldn't make him like a not experienced teacher. And he's kind of like 60 in his 60s,
wow.
And so it's like the best piano teacher you could find with so much like rich experience. But I think nobody explicitly told him how to teach.
Yeah,
and he was, and I would say that was kind of like this kind of like set traditional routine mindset, in which maybe he was just taught in this way. Maybe when he was young, when he was starting to play piano, his teacher was kind of like, so when he was young, it was probably in the 60s or and by that time, there was a culture of seniority in the Chinese culture. I think that is a very, still lasts to this date, in which like older people, like teachers, they are their views and their instructions are taken very seriously, and they have a very high stature compared to the students. And so in the end, so when he was young, he might be taught was like very cruel. Maybe his teacher even has like a 鞭子 too. Yeah, probably. Yeah, because by that time, when you learn all this kind of trades, tricks, and skills and stuff like that, people are being really cruel. Especially, they could be cruel to your body as well. They could have like very serious punishment.
But you never went through the physical,
evolve. The society, the understanding, the culture evolves.
Corporal punishments are not really much of a thing now.
But mentally, it's demotivating.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why he teaches every student in this way is because nobody explicitly tell him to change. And maybe he hasn't experienced...
So at what point did you realize that is maybe not the best way to teach? And when did you have that realization that actually, to be an educator means that you're considering the whole child, their well-being, their interests, nurturing, building that personal relationship, right?
Yeah, where you want to like talk to him as a friend sometimes. Yeah. Maybe you're just 7 or 8.
Yeah, that trust.
But you are looking forward to what he says.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of like the personal, like kind of like kind of glory, like the kind of like the he brings, like, so that when he stands there, you think, oh, he's such a great person. I want to talk to him. I want to know more.
That respect, genuine respect.
Yeah, genuine respect, but...
Yeah. Respect through, like, connection and relationship, not through authority or power.
Yes, that's right. I think it's because I met another teacher for calligraphy. Yeah, I started, like, calligraphy for 3 months or 4, like, with one teacher, just with my friends, because he's going, my parents knows... knew his parents, and they said maybe I could take me to a class, and I found myself, because everything is fun at the start, and so I started calligraphy, and after 6 months I finished with that teacher because maybe I just found the experience wasn't so exciting, and it was another problem of location. But then I met a great teacher who, because back in the past, maybe for thousands of years, when like scholars and students are trying to learn calligraphy, because in the past only scholars learn how to write in China, like the traditional, the ancient societies. But they have the set like 字帖 in which you follow like each character and you practice one by one, and then there's a set routine. You do this kind of style first, you do another style then, and then so it was kind of set routine. So starting from the first day when you saw the first book, where there was like thousands of characters, you know you're going to go through one of them, and then you turn to the second book, the third book, and it was set routine. But this teacher, he allowed me to choose whatever I want to learn. So basically, he has a pile of books on his bookshelf.
What's his name?
Lin Zhiyong. So he luckily had the same surname as him. Luckily, I had the same surname as him. That's the relationship. But yeah, so what we joke is like 几百年前是一家, or same family.
是500年前是一家.
Yeah. And he was basically allowing me to choose from any book that he had.
Wow.
And
so you really connected with him, and he...
Yeah.
By trusting you, you actually trusted him more.
Yeah. And to whatever, like, kind of like the form or style I want to write, whichever character, and also for painting as well. Later, I learned traditional Chinese painting with him. He's such a, like, great guy to know traditional calligraphy and painting, but maybe not that good and, proficient in that kind of skills compared to, like, a great calligrapher that I had before, but he teaches really well. Yeah, so like his skills is not that kind of like very high level like artist, but he teaches very well. So he asked me to choose like for painting as well, to choose whatever I want to imitate for that day, what I want to paint for that day, and then he teaches me how to paint it. So it's not the kind of like a systematic curriculum, but it aroused me genuine interest in art and calligraphy and something, and it's a rewarding experience. And I remember one summer when I was in grade like 3, I go to like his classes nearly every day.
Wow.
Yeah, so I found like the opportunity to be able to do something, to create something that you want for yourself, and it's much more exciting than expecting what you're going to do for the rest of your life. Going through the piles of books which you know you're never going to finish before quitting calligraphy.
Yeah, I mean, you were doing that when we had the 元宵节. Yeah. It was really cool. I didn't know that you had actually learned it formally.
Oh yeah, I learned it formally, but not that formally because it's this teacher. But I learned it for like 6 years back in the past. I haven't practiced it since joining high schools, kind of boarding schools.
When was the last time you talked with him?
Talked with him.
Communicated, yeah.
I think it's like 4 years ago, because skipping this year at Cambridge, the gap year.
Yeah. But you're clearly like very appreciative of him.
Yes, in high school.
Does he understand English?
Not much.
Could you maybe say some thanks to him in Chinese?
Yeah, I will do that. Yeah, my father has his contacts, but I will ask my father to do that to him.
No, like in this recording,
this recording, 谢谢你林老师，就是感谢你原来不仅教会我书法和国画，但他告诉我很多就是世界上的美好和各种不同的东西。他还 inspired我 reading, so he basically asked me to read books not only on traditional Chinese arts but on foreign arts as well. So back in the time when I was went to the UK, went to the US, when I go to museums, I basically purchase books of the paintings and arts. My father was like, "What are you going to do with these books?" And I said, "I'm just excited to read them," and I actually did finish them. So back in the time when I was in primary school, I maybe know more about say Monet or some great how do you call it, Renaissance painter than now, because I forgot all about them. But back then I know a lot. 所以谢谢你林老师，就是启发我不仅在书画和国画上帮助我就是提升技术，在很多其他方面也鼓励我去读书，也鼓励我去探索自己喜欢的东西。That's basically how he taught me. Wow. And he used to have an art school, which he had aspirations for it with another friend, and it was bankrupt. Literally bankrupt, because he get no students. Maybe parents just don't like the way he teaches sometimes, or maybe he's not a clever guy in terms of advertising or stuff. But from then I go to his home to have private lessons for a year, and then I went to high school. And the opportunity just came to an end, because during the high school I can only go back home for 24 hours in each week, so it's a day in each week, and not much opportunities to actually go and learn something I want to, which is a big pity that I had for high school life, boarding school.
Wow, that's so beautiful. I think it's so important for us to remember all those who have helped us along the way. And I think for teachers, when they teach children at that age may not always fully appreciate it, but with a bit of time and hindsight, it's quite powerful if he ever gets that warmth and appreciation. I think it will really make his day. Yeah. Okay, so you tried a lot of different things in primary school. You enjoy that creativity. You enjoy discovering. You enjoy just doing things. And was that very much the same attitude that you had going into high school?
Yeah, the same.
Just keep trying and keep learning. And
yes, but
was there a motivation? Was it just intrinsic motivation, curiosity, a thirst for knowledge? It wasn't you were forced to do it, or you were thinking ahead, oh, this will be great for, university applications. You were just...
Yeah. Because going back to the question about bravery, so I thought I wouldn't call it bravery. Maybe just curiosity that motivates me to do something which may seem strange, or maybe, let's say when I was young and playing in the, not woods, but I mean the grasslands and stuff, to look at the insects and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because now I may find it disgusting to touch an insect or something like that. But by that time I was just interested in everything, and maybe picking such things up, and maybe interacting with livestock when I go back to my hometown, pigs and what they have was pigs and cows and chicken, and it was kind of an amazing experience. It may be more curiosity based than bravery. So I would call myself, maybe one day when I'm curious about something, I wouldn't need some bravery to do it, because I'm just internally motivated to want to know more about it.
I believe you told me when you kindly invited me for the Trinity formal that you skipped year 6.
Yes.
Why?
I found it boring. Because it was kind of it wasn't, to be honest, speaking, that's one of the reasons why I appreciated it, that my parents had, because by that time I don't have much understanding of domestic and international education, but by then I hated the primary school system. So I was kind of like one of the best students in class. I wasn't networking that hard, so I couldn't be the first or second, but maybe like top 5. The class was big, 60 students, and was like maybe on average the best class in school. And so that's the reason why in our class there are many students who are kind of like sons and daughters of school teachers. So in the end, every year when they come to the opportunity of like bringing the 三好学生, so it's kind of like prizes for like a good student.
红领巾
Not 红领巾,
没有, okay.
就是奖状, 三好学生. I value that a lot, but in the end, it never came to me.
Really?
Maybe once, yeah, but
Okay.
one great teacher, and I also love her, but she like didn't taught us because of like on a pregnancy holiday since like grade 3, but she gave me the 三好学生and was motivated. I think I'm qualified because any top students are qualified.
Yeah.
In terms of like their standards, and like I was behaving very well during class. By then every day like 他们还有一个很奇怪的那种行为表，就是你做的好事，你上面打个勾。And I'm like, if this is an evaluation of like extracurricular, like good, I'm also good in this sense. But like the teachers just never gave me 三好学生 because they gave it to the sons
Did you
and
really
daughters.
want it though?
By that time when you were young, I think
You did, yeah.
When trying to be competitive, trying to be great, you actually want it, and it's a big like you get really sad. Despite it's just like a paper.
Yeah.
But
the meaning, the recognition that your efforts are acknowledged by an adult who you respect.
Yeah, and they just gave it to the daughters and sons of the school teachers. Some of them who never weren't behaving well.
Wow.
So maybe even have disciplinary history, and even like we have like kind of like 班级 the roles, like class roles, like 班长. Yeah, and they just get this kind of roles to the.
Is it by voting? 投票吗?
No, never. It was by just
那老师选自己的
arbitrary discretion. Yeah.
Wow.
And they were kind of like 不是自己的小孩，但是是自己同事的小孩。Yeah, and so it's what kind of like selecting the children of their like colleagues.
Even as a kid then, were you disappointed by that? And
yeah, I was
what
disappointed.
What did it teach you about human nature or team settings?
It didn't taught much to me about it because it was just because maybe for all these kind of sakes of like institutions and stuff, like interpersonal relationship is so complex at then for a child like me, and I wasn't able to understand like intuitively it's a problem with the system, but I was just thinking about it's a bad teacher. I was just too motivated in the end to maybe I should go to middle school. Want to change, but I can't just change school because it was kind of like in the national curriculum you go to the district school, and I was thinking I need to change. I just discovered the opportunity of like a private middle school who which accepted students through tests for only one class specifically. That is what they call like 创新班, the innovation class, which they want to use like kind of like hybrid education of online and offline with an iPad. By that time it was like kind of
massive,
very foresightful at that time, and they just wanted students. So like I went to the test, I passed it, maybe kind of more IQ based than knowledge based, but and then as like, it was one of the best private middle schools in our city. Maybe not one of, it's the best in terms of like for consecutive years. The first 中考, like 中考状元, so like the 中考, which is the middle school leaving examinations.
Sure.
Like the top first is in our school for like 3 or 4 consecutive years. So it's probably the best middle school. But they have the new class, so they want new students. Maybe they just want to earn money to recover a portion of their spending on like tablets and the system. And so I was in, and I basically told like the primary school teachers that I was leaving because I'm not going to study here, but I didn't leave an exact reason and destination of where I'm going. By now, maybe not like I wouldn't advise people doing so because I've been lucky, to be honest, to have like taken on a new challenge personally and found it to be well. Because I know people who have done similar things, but they have not been so successful. But it may not, it's for like multiple reasons. And so that's the reason why I skipped grade 6. I went to grade 7 directly. I spent the summer at my dad's office. I remember very clearly. And he was basically teaching me maths, but not teach. I read. So that's what he instructed me, to read about like the books, the 参考书, which is kind of the extra, and to practice on the questions and stuff like that when I have a problem and ask my dad. And he's been really helpful. So I spent the summer learning like grade 6 maths, grade 6.
Wow.
English wasn't a problem for me. And grade 6, like, Yuan, which is Chinese. I just read through all the
You enjoyed that?
the passages.
Yeah.
Because back then they tell you like to remember the answers of the understanding the passages. I hated that. But as I study on my own, I just read it.
Wow.
And it's been genuinely fun to actually...
Do you remember any like particular stories in those 语文课本里头你觉得like really inspired you or motivated you?
Maybe not from grade 6.
Okay.
But from grade 7, which I actually learned in school, but it was a story of like the first people to go to let me see, it's Antarctica. So like Nanjing, the South Pole.
Yeah.
The first people to go to the South Pole in the 1920s, and it was like the first team from the UK, and another team from from Norway, I guess. And basically, it was a diary. It was based on the diary of the UK captain. And by the time when the UK captain arrived at the South Pole, they'd been struggling so much with the storm and stuff, and they felt like the Norway team was ahead of them. So it was kind of the sudden demotivation, and then everything comes to become very serious, like the storm, the loss of heat, the not amount of food, and it was a story of like a tragic story, and they ended up just dead midway returning to the camp. So it was kind of like the first and the second. So people always say you remember the first person to go to the moon, but not the second. And it was kind of like, I love the story, I just don't know why, but it was kind of like a tragedy, because we don't learn much tragedy at like the national curriculum. And the books was much more, whether it's inspiring, whether it's like good in language for you to learn how to write and stuff, whether it's like kind of like a great ending, happy ending, great story to tell you good values and virtues and stuff. There wasn't much tragedies in the national curriculum, and this tragedy was special because aspirations, like kind of like I was aspiring things. I was kind of like trying to be competitive in every sense. So that's the reason why I love this kind of stories, like successes or failures. This led me to one memory, which was during when I was like in grade 3. Teachers asked us to write like a passage on our dream, and my dream was to go to Harvard. Because by then I had a habit of reading newspapers, and all I knew was like Harvard was a great school, right? and my passage got read aloud, in class.
Yeah. What was the reaction?
And people just don't believe me, and maybe I guess half of the students don't even know what Harvard was.
Yeah.
And I remember one guy who is actually like, I don't know how to call the profession, but he basically repairs anything with leather. So like leather bags, leather shoes, leather boots, and leather like jackets. But around the same time, so my parents, my father went to his shop to repair like a jacket or something. But when he was talking to me, I went with him. He asked what was my dream. At that time, I only knew about Harvard, so I said I want to go to Harvard. I want to go to Cambridge. I also know Cambridge as well. I remember very clear. I know Cambridge as well.
Harvard is at Cambridge, anyways.
Oh yeah. I want to go to Cambridge, but guess what?
And now you're at the better one.
I can't tell. So I have to go to Harvard.
Very diplomatic there. Sorry, go on.
And so for the next few months or year maybe, I remember when I was much older and returning, and he somehow recognized me and asked, how's your Cambridge project or like Harvard project?
Wow.
Yeah. So as a joke to him. But it's kind of like miraculous to see that I have actually completed something I was just wild guesses that I had when I was young.
Dream big. Manifest it.
Yeah, I was dreaming big because it's kind of like wild imagination, because it was I read from the newspaper, so it's kind of like a news report rather than like maybe an advertisement to say let's come to our school, but it's more like an introduction on such a great school, and kind of like maybe it's research, but I just can't remember what I read in the newspaper. So it was kind of miraculous to find myself like to actually be at Cambridge and to learn here.
Wow, that is so cool. So in high school then, so you skipped the year, so then in your cohort you'll be one of the youngest people.
Yes.
Was that a challenge at all? Because I guess like people obviously grow at different age, even with puberty and growth spurts. Like, yeah, what was it like being the youngest?
Nervous.
Nervous?
It's a very nervous experience at first. Because when you join a group of people who were like 2 years older than you find like they were talking about different things. Basically, it's a little bit harder to get into their social circles as well. At first, because maybe you're playing different video games. You were using different chat apps because they used QQ by that time, which was kind of like the like I can't like maybe from 2005 to 2015 thing, and starting 2016, I found many people using WeChat. So by the time when I went to school, went to high school, I used WeChat predominantly, and they were just basically chatting on QQ. So it was kind of like a huge difference in terms of like what we know, what we believe in, maybe the bands we like, the music we listen to, and the understanding of the world. I knew exactly when I first joined high school, I didn't have an understanding of what like Nike or Adidas was, but like classmates, they were basically chasing the newest release of like a Nike basketball shoes, and at the time, okay, so people were actually considering seriously what they were wearing on their toes, and so it was kind of like changing understanding, because back when I was young, maybe I had more interest in fiction books than a shoe brand, but then I found like kind of like the topic they talked about, the understanding, the chat apps they use, everything's different, and it's the process of trying to adjust. But I call myself very lucky, maybe just the second or third time I use it tonight, but to have got into a community which is really supportive and helpful, and they were kind of like accepting me in terms of like maybe I just can join the chats and listen. And as time passed on, we become friends. We find common like hobbies and interests. For instance, starting then, I started to play football. So it's kind of like, maybe I should join. And it was very interesting experience at first, because I was like shorter than them, because it was during the adolescence and people were growing like growing taller every year significantly. And so being 2 years younger just means I'm two maybe 20 centimeters shorter. But so I was playing goalkeeper. I can't like compete physically with so I compete with the ball in terms of like the strengths. But I just need to catch the ball. But it was a good experience of like all these activities and the student union and clubs and societies that get me involved to have like shared topic and shared interest with people, and they were just like open to talk to you. And I'm very happy to have not met bullies, because maybe it's like a small community. It's an international department of a new school, so there was not many people, and people there was like being very helpful. And thanks to the school environment as well, like there wasn't much rivalry. There wasn't much, like people doing like not behaving well or something. It was kind of a very good environment that helped me to successfully pass through the first few months, the first year, and then it rolled on very well.
Eventually you became head boy.
Yes. So in my A1 year, I became head boy because it was voted. So this time it wasn't like the primary school. It wasn't like at the discretion of a teacher. It was voted. And despite being young, despite being like, people say like he looks much younger as well. Despite like being much younger, it's like, you can tell it from the face, not only from like talks and me telling people explicitly, but I'm starting to find like people now don't recognize me as younger. Yeah, I like this kind of feeling, but by then you could actually differentiate a 16-year-old from a 14-year-old.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Maybe just by the hate. And maybe by the beard. Yeah. So
you still don't have any beard.
I have it, but I shave it sometimes, and the more frequent I shave it, the older I grew, I realized myself. But yeah.
But before head boy, you were deputy head boy for 2 years.
Yes.
So you have already had that. Is it very much like a pathway at the school where the deputy head boys move up?
So I spent 4 years at high school. The first 2 in one school.
Yeah.
So studying the IGCSE curriculum. So it's kind of like secondary education, and then it was like a sixth form education of A level at another school. So I was basically deputy head boy and for 2 years, well I call it like 1 and over half years strictly, and then another opportunity it was like in the next school it was like head boy for the first year. So in the start, my deputy head boy came after me as an involvement in the media office. So I was like kind of initially involved with communications media department, and then by the time the election they would call it came, it was the school discretion on a student who become a deputy head boy, head girl, and deputy head boy. So we have 4 like kind of like head roles. And so for the first year, I was actually chosen at discretion. And the second year, I was kind of voting and jumping to the next school, spending 3 months there, and then getting the vote at, I think it was December. And people just know me well, and I become head boy. It was a combination of experience and me, I think, was kind of like being nice to people. I always trusting to be nice to people, despite like in the school, despite there was no bullies. Maybe there was bullies, but they were not aiming at me. But there was people who kind of marginalized. There were people who, well, if you talk to your friends, they may say some bad words about him. But I don't usually see this as kind of like me different from them, like kind of not different, but I mean to maybe have a separate social circle with them. I kind of like interact with all people in the school, and not limited to students, the teachers, the porters, which we call buying cars. So literally they were kind of like just at the front gate. But because sometimes I go back home and I'm waiting for my parents at the gate, I talk to them. So they know me personally. The catering officers, they know me personally. And was kind of like in the school community, nearly every student I know every student in the school, and I was trying to be nice to everybody. So I don't think I have the so-called enemies. So I can point out like several pairs of like people who would never get into the same room as at the school, because they have some like history. But I wouldn't call myself to have any enemy, I guess. But
how were you able to do that?
Because I trusting to be nice, to be helpful, and to not, I don't know if intimidate is the right word, but to make other people feel anxious or awkward, and to listen. So there were people who, some students, well, special students at school, because maybe they were underperforming, they just they have a total different personality, an introverted personality. When they talk to you, some people would just not talk to them. They would walk away. But for me, I would listen and would try to respond. So that's the reason why, one of the last 2 years of high school, there was one student who like people just don't like him. Some people say he's like, just call it like retarded or something like that. To say that he's kind of totally thinking a different way than others. But when he talked to me, I would love to talk to him and listen. Maybe I wouldn't be able to share much thoughts and opinions on what he's thinking about, because I don't know much and don't know well. But I think to be able to listen is kind of like, maybe I wouldn't call like we are good friends. Maybe he thinks so, but I think I'm friends with everybody. I mean, it's kind of like a opportunity to listen to everybody and be nice to everybody, to as I said, like not to intimidate and just to make everybody feel that you're a supportive person. And that's something special, because after I come to Cambridge, I felt like everybody is like extremely helpful. like what I did was like kind of trying to be open. So during the freshest months, I felt like everybody just walk on the college grounds, and people would just ask you, hey, are you a fresher? And what subject to study? Which year? Where are you living? So it was kind of like the environment makes me feel that, okay, I'm at some place where I expected the school could be, I expected the school should be. Not could be, but should be. I expected maybe in the future high schools and middle school should also have this kind of community, because maybe less people will feel marginalized and less people will feel demotivated, especially.
So what do you think defined your leadership style? I'm guessing that inclusivity was a massive component. What else defined that you really took pride of, that defined Shen's leadership?
Oh, I think it was kind of like extreme passion and intense. I would call it an intense mentality when I had during high school at the year at Hat Boy, because our school moved to a new campus. It was a new school as well, so there was not many like established international schools in our city. So I come from like a relatively small and new school, and we just moved to a new campus. So the school finally, after saving money for like a few years, they're able to afford a campus to ourselves. So finally not renting. So before we were renting a campus, although separate, but now new campus, and there were just so many problems. And what I was thinking about was like, we saw like problems with catering. So it was not the Chinese style thing, but I basically just asked the teacher, I need to stress, to schedule a chat with the catering director. And we just basically had a very fierce discussion of how much meat we should include in like a regular 18-yuan meal. So, but just to provide the context, there are not many vegetarians in China. So basically people care more, what they care about the quality of the meal is like how many proteins you can get. And what they gave was like not kind of like equally standard to the price they've been charging. So 18 yuan is a very high price in terms of like high school caterings, and what they gave was like very like bad food in terms of like the variety, the quality, cleanliness and hygiene and stuff like that. And I basically I set up a WeChat account some months ago, and I basically just, without the permission of a teacher, I just wrote a post in the WeChat account saying, what are your opinions on the catering, on the canteen? It was a very not Chinese stuff. So in China, in Chinese, like usually people would serve it by like kind of like 大事化小，小事化了. So we could serve it privately. We'll talk and then mitigate the problem, so that less people will know, less impact will be created, and we'll try to solve it. But it's a slow and an ineffective process. So even after like me directly pressuring the canteen, which is a separate firm, I don't know, and which corrupt process, which I now confirm is a corrupt process, that they got the right to sell food in the school, they won't respond if I go through the kind of like big to small, small to none method. But what I was trying was being very fierce. So that was kind of like the leadership experience that I had, was like be very fierce on the things that I need to do.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, extremely passionate, even like beyond like what the teacher allowed. Like usually before every post, we will ask the teacher, because it's kind of like one of the propaganda methods of the school as well, despite the channel being like directly controlled by me. But I will like casually ask them to approve the message before I sent them out. But that day I just got so angry after the talk with the catering director, I just posted one message myself. So there's an example of me doing very fierce and passionate things, trying to, it's basically arguing with people, trying to achieve changes that improves the school community.
So who were or are your role models then?
Pardon?
Who were or are your role models?
I had different role models. One of the person that I shared who had huge influence on me, it was during a Q meeting, talking of entrepreneur with Steve Jobs. It was kind of like the classic example maybe primary school students would get on the diary. So that seems, I'm pretty immature, but to be honest, it was like he laid huge influence on me throughout until high school. Because it was kind of like he was this kind of person with a fierce as well as determined mentality. Sometimes it may prove that he's wrong. He might intimidate people. He might create enemies. He might, but he has this kind of insane persuade for perfection, for simplicity, for design, for like the kind of like products that he wanted to make, because I remember important words like product inside his biography, not bibliography. Shit, I'm stuck with essays, but it's biography. Yeah, and was like the product. So he has this kind of insane mentality of doing things. I just like the way of how people were like so crazy about something could make it happen and to make great things happen. By that time, he had a great influence on me, and so whenever I would try to do something, I was thinking, okay, I can do it. I have this kind of like motivation to do it. So during high school, when I go to different competitions, maybe preparing for applications, definitely, but I think I can do it, despite it's challenging, despite I come from like small school, because in some cases, you'd be a little bit nervous in front of like a school who is kind of like we call a 人大附中 or kind of like 上外附中 Shanghai 外国语大学附属中学 so like the affiliate high school of Shanghai Foreign Language University, which is like a very famous international school in China. So we kind of get nervous because it's such a great school and they have much better English than you. They seem much more professional, business-like, more mature. Even at the same age and same grade, the same like much older student than you. So I kind of get nervous, but I had this kind of mentality that Steve Jobs made with his company, which he failed at first, was kind of like to get fierce and get strong and pursue what you do. So this may lead him to be excluded from Apple management at first and then returning to Apple at around 2008. So he was kind of excluded for a period, but for this reason, he was excluded, but for this reason, he was successful and building a company with a culture of like high quality innovation, or products that serves consumers' needs and stuff like that.
You fiercely pursued American unis, like Stanford was your dream school, I believe.
Yeah.
And how did you end up choosing between US and UK, and how did you end up here in terms of university?
It was actually a very hard decision last year. So basically, I cried about like not being able to go to UCLA. So basically, I applied to US universities, but the thing I know from US universities is that they won't usually accept like first generation applicants from a new school. So they won't show about like, because they care a lot about your GPA, and the GPA issued by our school is just not so compelling in terms of like the tradition, because I know that in many schools they just get fake GPAs. So everybody has a 4.0 or 3.996. And so even if my school gives me a perfect GPA, they wouldn't trust it.
There's no advantage, yeah.
Yeah, there's no advantage.
But if you don't get full, then...
yeah. It always seems strange. Yep. And so they need the type of tradition in which like maybe a student taking a 4 at this school actually come to university and performing well, they will accept you. The process is like, and they have just so many great applicants from other schools, so why should they risk admitting a student which they are not sure about their GPA, about their school's education standards and stuff like that? How could they be sure? So it's pretty hard to apply to the US, especially with the A-level curriculum as well. It's not that diverse. I study mostly like physics, maths, further maths, and econ. And econ wasn't technically what we call in China 文科, liberal
humanities.
Humanities, yes. And uni it turns to social science and more science based. So I'm pretty disadvantaged applying to the US, but I would love UCLA for my whole life, because they have
not when you were year 3 you wanted Harvard.
Right.
I remember.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for the rest of my life. Maybe I'll just love how like they kind of like acknowledged me for what I did during high school, and there's something very rewarding.
Yeah.
And I like the American system because they allow you to have a little bit of flexibility over your curriculum.
That liberal arts.
So what I hate about Cambridge Econ is like you can't choose at the first year. You can choose the subjects you want to study, but it's good to know different things, because sometimes when people don't force you to do something, you will never discover how great it is.
Yeah.
But it may not turn out that helpful. Maybe British economic history, but I'm just joking. But yeah, I mean.
So you were the first and youngest person in your province to, I guess, get that Cambridge offer and to come to Cambridge.
Yes.
And you were 15.
Yeah, I was 15 before my birthday.
Which is insane. I was not considering university, let alone Cambridge, when at 15.
Yeah, I was considering university and Cambridge.
So essentially you were starting to think about Cambridge at like 13, 14 and preparing.
14. So it was kind of like a year before I turned 15. It was like 14. I was starting to know that, okay, Cambridge has to go to Cambridge Econ, you take a test, which was called ECAA, and now it's TMU.
Yeah.
And you need to prepare for an interview.
Yeah.
And they were just massive amounts.
And then who quote unquote forced you to take a gap year?
Trinity.
Also, they said you're too young to come.
Yep. I wrote many times.
Would you have come if they let you?
Yes.
So you would be 15.
Yeah. And so there's just so many mysteries and much more like opportunities of like talking, thinking of what will my life be if I have been here a year ago. So that would be kind of like just so many things.
You'd be president of Q.
Really? No, I was just because last year wasn't like that fruitful for me. Mostly in terms of like lockdowns in China, so I wasn't able to travel around, and so in gap year people would imagine you to travel around the country, especially China, such a large country.
What were you doing then?
I was kind of like lost in terms of like what I actually should do. So I've been switching different kind of things I do. Spend the first 2 months voluntarily teaching in my hometown's middle school. And my hometown literally was a town. And Chinese time was like xiang, so it's ton. And it was like 2 hours away from the nearest county. And you have to drive through the mountain. So it's like 38 kilometers, which is not far. But the 38 kilometers are mountain road, winding mountain road. And so it was kind of like a very, very, so that's where my father lived when he was young. And they have a very like small community, and they have a middle school. And I just, sorry, so it was like kind of a great opportunity to learn more about like the hometown that I actually come from. My father actually come from, so but in China we call it hometown, as the place where a family like my father was born, and to be able to take some time to live with my grandparents and other relatives, and most importantly with the kids there who motivated me a lot to learn about life and development and things that is actually happening around me. I taught English and math there. And basically I have better oral English than every teacher at school, possibly, I say. Because, I wouldn't, this may be a very confident but actually it is. I have better oral English than nearly every teacher. So for like a few weeks, I wake up every day at around like 5:40. They have their morning reading at 6:20 or 6:30, and very early. The kids wake up very early to have like morning reading, and what they read was like English, was words, texts and sentences, conversations, and I led their like morning reading, just 领读, on English, because my pronunciation was like probably the best among the school and maybe around the town. But not many people can speak English around the town. But yeah, so
what are like 2 takeaways from your gap year? Like what did you learn from it in terms of who you are now? Like how did it shape you?
I guess I'm much more mature at interacting with people who is beyond my age. So I wasn't speaking of people who are like 2 years older than me, like the peers who come to uni and study with me at the same year, but it was like people much older. So in the gap year, I predominantly interacted with kids very young, and then I went to Shanghai for an internship. So it was like workmates, with like the relatives who I lived with when I was in my hometown, and also with a person who I lived in her house during my internship at Shanghai for a few months, and then I was stuck in my school during the quarantine. So it's a complex story, but what I learned was like basically interacting with people, especially those much older than me, with different perspectives and different, different background in terms of like how they grew up in their understanding of the world. And so because I wasn't living with my peers throughout the gap year, I wasn't in school, but I was much more involved with people so different age. And what it taught me was like when interacting with people, I can't draw a simple conclusion from the many interactions that I had. What I felt the most was like every people is different, and every story is very intriguing. So I could talk for hours with a person who is not in my age, and to learn a lot about his story. I couldn't draw a one sentence conclusion on how to interact with people or what I learned, but it was kind of like
so
so
many
much
empathy and appreciation for the diverse experiences people have had.
Yes. And if it was not for the gap year, I wouldn't meet all of them. I wouldn't be able to.
So in retrospect, quoting Steve Jobs, the dots connected.
Oh yeah, the dots connected. Yeah. And also quoting Steve Jobs, stay hungry, stay foolish. That's what I regret during the gap year. It was kind of like I wasn't learning much, but it was more of like as a person's improvement rather than as a student's improvement in terms of academic abilities that I had during the gap year. And the obstacles that I got, maybe one of the worst years that I had since I entered primary school, because I had a very smooth life and people was like considering me as a genius or something when I was like going into the school 2 years younger than them, taking like the TOEFL test and being like 20 or 30 points higher than them, and just say you're a genius. But I mean, just joking. But the point is, it was one of like the first obstacles I got. This first major thing which didn't win with my will, and that is to live through a gap year, which was kind of like I was driving on the road.
Humbled you a little bit, or not really?
Probably, but I wouldn't call myself like kind of
arrogant.
Yeah.
So you knew that there was still a lot of work to do, but other people obviously saw, and I mean your achievements are incredibly impressive. Don't get me wrong. I don't think it's outrageous to think that you're a genius. I think you're incredibly competent and smart, as you know. But you're... Go on. So you were driving in that gap year and...
Yeah, but I was suddenly stopped. So it's kind of like I was driving a very great car. We were testing for like the first few miles, and then I got stopped and told to stop and wait here for a year before roaring on again.
Yeah.
It's like kind of great engine, because I feel like as a person or as a car, I'll get much, much worse as time rolls on, because that's what people told me, what older people told me. So when you get old, you will regret something that you haven't done when you were young, because you won't be able to do many things. So I would imagine myself maybe living one of the best years of my life, to not being planned and not being expected. And I learned much lessons from it, and that is to get my life planned and to be prepared for whatever happens.
And continuing that metaphor, I feel like you're on an aeroplane at the moment at Cambridge.
Really?
Yeah, you're flying everywhere, you're trying different things, you're going more than 100 miles an hour, far more than that, and you're roaming around and exploring the world, basically. So how have you found Cambridge as a 16, 17-year-old?
I found it to be, it is a very great place.
Did you lose a bit of academic momentum taking that gap year?
Yes. Yeah, that's what I regret a lot. I wasn't learning things. I was kind of like doing what I want to do, but not learning. So I wasn't reading. I found it much harder to read right now. Maybe not. Maybe because of ADHD. Just joking. But I mean, I mean, I'm not more that accustomed to spend long time in front of a desk and to be able to read and process information and to learn, and maybe to sit in the lecture hall and to follow a routine. But the process of the experience of living here at Cambridge and trying to regain the kind of like learning momentum has been a huge, not challenge, but a huge task for me in terms of like how I'm going to leverage my strengths and to be able to learn at a great place here in front of so many different opportunities. That is something which is hugely different from the life of before, because before there wasn't much options. What I can do is pretty much set. There was not set, I mean the choices wasn't that diverse, but at Cambridge you can do loads of things, and to say I'm on an airplane, I have like many different routes or like different destinations in which I could go, and it's amazing experience, but you kind of feel lost. And that's the reason why I wrote in my bio or introduction, was that kind of like the world around me is evolving faster than I try to understand it. So there was like maybe one day something, maybe just one of the huge things was about careers, and maybe one day I just got to know that, there was something called investment banking. And an investment banking division of an investment bank is different from IB. So IBD and IB are different. And what does it do? And maybe it's on the sell side, and what is a consulting firm doing? And so it's kind of like, and maybe then one day turn to entrepreneurships, and maybe even during class, during like econ study, I said, we're doing like a 3-hour test on tripods. So usually we don't take 3-hour tests back in high school, but so it's kind of like these things evolve around me. So there was much more information, opportunities for me to process than I could maybe ever grasp it. And so, yeah.
How do you find the intellectual environment at Cambridge? Like, do you feel very stretched? And how do you find your interactions with peers who, on average, are all incredibly thirsty for knowledge?
Well, I found it to be a very great experience. But it's kind of like overall a loving community, but internally competitive as well, in terms of like, because there are just so many metrics in which you could see to, maybe there's some standard I ranked for myself. Because the overall looking back from history and kind of being anxious, and as I mentioned maybe an hour ago, was kind of like I was keen to compare myself to somebody I know. So if I learn piano, I would compare myself to a friend who I know is best in piano. And here at Cambridge, I would kind of have some kind of like anxiety in terms of like people are doing such, people are doing this, people are doing that. And I would be anxious if I wasn't doing that well, or being able to complete by the same standards, or like getting the same achievement. So I was setting some metrics for myself, and I don't think that is the best thing to do. And to balance this anxiety with motivation is kind of like an important task for me in the future.
Are you often anxious? Do you consider yourself an anxious person?
Yeah, I would consider myself always anxious, but not like kind of like more anxious than happy. Sometimes I do feel anxious at specific moments, and by that time I was thinking about maybe because maybe I've been too smooth in terms of like my life in the past, like, I mean, the eventual outcome. So during the process, there was just so many challenges.
But each step you've made it.
But somehow I made it. Yeah. So I would call myself lucky or something. But now it was kind of like, to speak of anxious, it's kind of like.
Are you worried that you won't make the next step?
Yes, and I wouldn't.
But objectively and rationally, that's not true. You will make the next step.
No. I would rather call myself like, I'm now questioning whether it will actually be true. And what I'm more worried about is, what I'm concerned as a person who has such kind of like a smooth achievement, like history, is that I don't want to say that I'm going to fail, or to acknowledge I'm going to fail. So I'm going to like acknowledge failure.
What does failure even mean? Like, what is not making making to where?
Yeah, so that's what I'm like recently been thinking about, is what is a successful life that I'm going to try to do and beyond school. And so speaking of failure, I had expectations, and if I don't reach it, maybe I call it a failure. But what is the purpose of that expectation? So the goals that I'm setting myself are pretty much so many, because I saw people with all this kind of talents around Cambridge, and because it's just a fabulous community, people with all different skills, backgrounds, knowledge, studying all different subjects. There's just so many things that I look for myself to do and achieve. But maybe one day I may fail in achieving it because I just didn't meet my expectations. But as a person who has been like consistently, not consistently, but I mean in most cases, achieving what I want, I felt like after coming to Cambridge, I need to admit failure. And by failure, I mean to not reach my expectations. But a new conclusion for me is that what if I could set my expectations lower, or set alternative expectations that best suits me? So I've been expecting too much to make myself the best in every field I'm interested. Not field, I mean every subject I'm interested. But later found what are the trade-offs and what is the best sign to let go, or to say that maybe I need to stop doing something or stop expecting myself to become.
What was something that you had let go of in the past year?
Music. So I had this sensation that I maybe need to pick up a musical instrument during my gap year, and then eventually turned out maybe I wasn't the material for music, or maybe it was the childhood history of having a very bad piano teacher for like 2 years and practicing in front of the piano, very bored and demotivated, makes me feel that maybe I'm not a good musician and won't be able to be a good musician, and I just let go music. So I studied guitar for like 2 or 3 months last year, but it turned out that I don't have the kind of persistence in doing that. And I know many friends who can play guitar. I was motivated to start playing guitar, and I bought my first guitar because I just saw like a concert hosted by one of my friends. So it was kind of like, okay, he's doing great with a guitar, and I love music. I have so many songs that I want to play because he could basically spontaneously play like a pop song, and we could sing it. So I want to learn the skill as well. I want to learn, like, I'm not saying that I want to be like him, but the problem is I want to have some skill, and I found maybe I'm just not the material for doing so. I don't have enough time to do so, and to be now I wouldn't call to be the best. Now I want to call to be achieving my expectations of being like playing the guitar well. Yeah.
I mean, you're hours away from your 18th.
Yes.
Let's say the UK at least.
Yeah.
And what are some of the expectations that you have for the next year of your life then? What do you want to achieve, whether that's personal development, whether that's career, whether that's intellectual pursuit? What are some of the goals? And it'll be interesting for you to maybe listen back to this in a year or 3 years and 5 years to see what 17-year-old Shen wanted.
Yeah, the last few hours of being 17, and I want to see myself. So actually, when I heard about like you reading the kind of like description of myself, like the intro that I wrote like maybe a week ago or 10 days ago, I was finding myself like kind of naive in a sense, and I maybe want to change what I wrote. So it was kind of like constantly evolving process. But I would say now, but I would expect myself in a year's time to lose the habit of procrastination and to have faith in what I do. So it's kind of like I need an internal motivation, a stronger motivation, the kind of mentality that I had during high school student union, that I need to achieve something. I don't know where this faith could come from. We just talked about briefly talked about religion when we were like walking to your room, but it could come from religion, it could come from internal motivation, it could come from some like lifelong goal or some plan, but I want to see myself in a year with kind of facing what I'm going to do. So I'm not specifying what I'm going to do and not specifying the specific way, but I just want
attitude, a peace, and inner peace and motivation and fulfillment.
Yeah, to be able to have a strong feeling and purpose for what I do, and to be intense and the kind of like things that I do.
Foolish.
Yeah.
And hungry.
In what I do. Okay, going back to Steve Jobs, but yeah, that's one thing. And maybe speaking of more like specific ones, maybe take the opportunity to go to a summer internship. Before going to college, I've always aspired myself to become an economist. But after coming to college, maybe learning the Cambridge econ curricula, I found myself maybe more suited to do kind of like applied economics or kind of applied in industries. And so I would expect myself to be in an internship, to be honest, not to primarily to convert it, but more to know about what I'm going to do in the future. As what I talked to my parents about, like what my future plan was going to be, I was talking about how anxious I was, like people around me were like busy preparing for their careers and stuff. My parents told me, you can just go to and have your master's degree. They said, why would you hurry? Because they said you are young and you have time to take a master's degree. And what I was saying was kind of like, it was an anxiety that brought me to this route, but it was kind of like a process of like, maybe I should actually try and learn more about like the corporate side of like my career, and to think about if that's the best option. And if I like it, I would maybe want to have an internship that could convert or apply to a future job inside consulting or banking or market research, equity research or something like that. But I will leave an alternative path for me to do more academic jobs in the future and to pursue further degrees as well. So next year I would just, so in summary, it was kind of like to have a determination, a goal, and to be able to know better what my future path is going to be. So after all these times, after so many talks, after like we talk a lot about like future goals during our way here, but I still couldn't reach out a conclusion.
But I don't think you will, in a year's time, figure out exactly what you'll be doing. Like,
No.
this is the lifelong process, right?
No,
This is the excitement of life.
Right.
Shouldn't you be worried if you, next year, this time, you're like, oh yeah, I know exactly what I'll be doing in 5 years. Like, I think a sense of uncertainty and a measured, healthy sense of anxiety could actually be quite healthy, assuming that there's a positive intention and purpose of a higher goal, a noble pursuit, right?
I like that. Right. Yeah, so I shouldn't be too worried next year at this time, maybe.
I don't think
Listening
you
back
should
to
be.
this
I think
product,
you're...
a podcast and say maybe I don't have an exact planning of what I'm going to do in the future, but maybe I just know a little bit better about myself and plan a little bit better of what I do.
I think we all crave certainty, but we also benefit from excitement. You know, I'm sure when you look back on your life, so, you know, your gap year as an example, at the start of it, you would be quite annoyed. You know, I want to start in this, lockdown. I can't do what I want to do. But clearly, as you reflect upon it now, those conversations that you've had, what it's taught you about people and the stories, I don't know. There must be, like, things always work out the way it should, right? And I think, I don't know, I just feel like if you set your goal of absolute, like more certainty, then I think that's counterproductive and it's just very unrealistic.
Right.
Whereas if you set it, I really like what you said about that meaning and purpose and feeling like you belong to something far greater than yourself. You know, I think that's why community service is such a important aspect of life, because you realize that there are other people and there are bigger courses, and that even though we are small, but we are deeply significant in other people as well, that they are also deeply significant, and it's the relationships that we forge along the way. And it sounds like you're doing all the right things of working hard, staying hungry, trying out different roles, you know, even on the Cambridge University Entrepreneurs Committee, you're taking on these different projects, like, you know, a secretary, helping out with meetings, competitions, sponsorships, now designing our stash as well. And I know that you've been involved in, like, the Chinese Society, Investment Banking Society. Like, I just feel like I don't know why you're that worried. I think you're doing absolutely everything remarkably well at 17. Like, yeah, like most people in your year would be 19, 20. And I think you should be very proud of what you have already achieved. And there's so much more to come. Like, I'm so excited for you. There's just so much, that so many good things will come that you won't even comprehend at this point. You won't even know what's out there, but I know that they're out there and coming for you, which should bring you excitement and it should bring you joy, I hope. In the context of giving you a legacy-worthy interview, I've got 2 final questions to wrap up, but is there anything else that you really want to feature in this recording? Because, we've touched on a lot, but, you know.
Yeah, I just discovered I've been saying a lot for too long.
You feeling all right?
Yeah, I'm feeling all right.
Have you had this kind of experience of extensively sharing your thoughts and story?
Not very often.
And how do you feel about it?
Very good. Just thank you a lot for the opportunity and for
That's
listening.
right. You're not off the hook yet. I got 2 more.
Oh yeah.
I guess, like, second to last question is, we've talked a lot about success and drive and achieving. Can you give me like some more tangible or intangible examples of success, or like, can you define success? Can you see success? Can you feel success? Can you hear success? Or is it a very personal, subjective thing? And if it is a personal, subjective thing, what is it from your perspective? Is it, if that makes sense? Sorry, I'm not wording it great, but I think you get my point.
Yeah, I would consider success like, if according to same definition that I gave a while ago, to failure was kind of like not achieving my expectation, then success may be achieving my expectations. But by then, the same problem still lies in how do I set my expectations. And now I would say what I expect for the long run as success, and what my maybe as in my understanding now for the career goal is to be, for myself to be happy, and that is success, and to make the people around me feel happy as well, and feel happy about what I do and the impact that I share on people around me, maybe family relatives, and maybe even wider the community, possibly, is that I'm a good person, and I will be. Oh, I'm speaking of death now, but if I go die at some point, some people would remember me as a good person. So that's what I call success. Is like at any point, if I suddenly disappear, so I'm dead or somehow, and then people will remember me with a good image. And before I die, and before that specific time point come, I live generally a happy life, and I think that would be success. And so that's the reason why my expectation for being successful will be just for me and the people around me to feel happy.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, death, our mortality can be a difficult subject to talk about, but I think there is value in confronting these inevitable nature of life. You know, we're all going to pass away at some point, and, you know, God forbid, sometimes it happens unexpected. I mean, it never happens at the right moment, right? But it's very powerful, I think, to think about our eulogies, and, you know, and when we think about funerals, and when we think about we remember people, I think we've all gone through relatives or friends who have passed away, but you almost never hear eulogies like, oh, this person made this amount of money, or this person achieved that amount of fame. It's always the very basics, and they're common things like kindness, compassion, generosity, sense of humour, community service, a loving husband, a caring mother, a great servant of his or her community. I think that's a clue for me, at least personally, where what matters at the end of life, or what matters all of life, in fact, is the relationships we forge, the memories we create, the contributions we have, and that just inherent goodness that transcends any of the materialistic criteria of our modern society, which, especially at a place like Cambridge, it pushes you to think that our identity and our worth lies in these kind of like materialistic things. But the problem with that is the goalpost keeps moving, right? Because once you earn $1 million, then you want 2 million. Indeed. Then you go, well, I want 10 million. Then you want to buy a football team. Then it's like, at what point does that ever reach there?
Well, that used to be my dream.
But I think love and all these values that we talk about, they're almost easy to do, but they're also some of the hardest thing to do, is, you know, consistently loving your family when it's hard, showing resilience when inevitable challenges arrive. I think it's a good question to think about. What success means now, what it means to you, and what it means at the end of life. So I'm glad that you brought that up. Final question. What's one message, quote, or saying that you wish every educator, teacher, coaches would promote and every kid would internalize? So after all that you've been through, summarize like your top words of wisdom to finish the podcast.
I would say like the general comment is like to love and trust in what you do, and to motivate yourself to go forward with whatever you want to do. So don't be shaken when people question you about your cause, because as long as you are confident in what you do, what you love you're gonna do, or what you love about what you're doing, you should like persist in doing it, trust yourself, and always good. So it's kind of like the combination of loving what you do, maybe loving how to play piano, as well, and loving how to calligraphy and stuff like that, to the point where I felt like a strong mentality, a cause, a purpose, and a motivation to do something. So it's a combination of these two. It's just to love and to be motivated by what you do. And so when you just love what you do, feel motivated, and do it, and no matter what like people say and maybe what obstacles there are, it's just to love what you do and do it.
Such a pleasure meeting you, Shen, and I'm so glad you've been on committee and that our lives have crossed paths. And again, thank you for the energy, and thank you for your commitment, and thank you for allowing me the privilege to have this conversation hours before turning 18. So special. I really, really appreciate it.
I'm also very glad to be on your podcast and to be able to share so much. It's been a very great experience. Thank you, Dave.